CapeTalk has been broadcasting just a couple of months short of 29 years, and several times each year of those 29 years, we've had a conversation about whether we should finish the unfinished freeway bridges, or whether we should, or if we take the view that we should finish them, how we should finish them, and all those sorts of things. And it's up for discussion again because the mayor yesterday, while talking to a community radio station, said we are going to finish the unfinished Foreshore Freeway bridges, and in September we will release for public comment initial design proposals, and we will then refine the project following public participation before construction begins. And I've always been guided in this by something that James Clark, who used to write about urban matters for the Star newspaper, that he was big on this. Creating more roads just creates more traffic. The more road capacity you provide, the more cars will use that extra road capacity. So if there is any benefit, there is only a short-term benefit. I have been taken to task for that view by several listeners who tell me that I'm talking nonsense and that finishing the unfinished freeway will make a significant difference to traffic in and out of town. We don't know exactly what the city's initial proposals are. The city doesn't want to talk about it for the moment. But we are joined now by Edgar Pieterse, founding director of the African Centre for Cities, which is based at the University of Cape Town. Edgar, good afternoon, and thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, John, and good to be back with you.
What's your view? Finish them quickly, or hold on a second, or somewhere in between?
It's very difficult to have a view because it feels until the city actually tells us what they're thinking of doing and how they're going to complete it and what it will cost, etc. It's sort of a nothing burger. Because as you've said, this debate ebbs and flows in Cape Town public discourse forever. So yeah, I guess my attitude is one of disbelief until I see something concrete on the table. So it's quite hard to comment. I mean, as an urbanist, I like the idea that cities are imperfect and that they carry the scars of sort of plans gone awry in the past and sort of grand ambitions that have never come to fruition, and they live with that. They get comfortable in its own skin. And the sort of unfinished freeway feels like one of those things, but that is sort of the romantic urbanist side of me. Because more pragmatically, we do know we've got a major headache with congestion in the city, and the engineers in the city of Cape Town tells me that that's the worst choke point in the city. So I understand where the mayor is coming from, but as I say, it's so difficult to comment. And of course, the main issue is opportunity cost. There's lots of demand in the city for all kinds of strategic investments. And there's no way, whatever they're thinking of in planning, that this is going to be cheap. And so, so the opportunity cost considerations can only be weighed once we know what they're actually talking about and what the potential budget envelope might be.
I mean, he did say that it would largely be funded by private funding, and then you go, okay, why is the private sector going to fund this? The private sector doesn't do things out of the goodness of their private sector hearts. They want something in return, and what would that something in return be? Is we don't know the answer because, as you say, we haven't seen the proposals, but it's an immediate question to ask.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly anything that gets done there must involve partnerships with Sunrail. So I know that the stretch of the N2 from the airport into town becomes the custodianship of the city. I'm not entirely sure where that ends for the N1. That knuckle, of course, is a confluence of these two highways. So that's one issue, is where does Sunrail sit within all this, the National Road Authority. Secondly, it's adjacent to the waterfront and the Port Authority. And I'm absolutely certain that the Port Authority will have to be engaged because they're the landowners that would have to be engaged in terms of whatever is done with the unfinished freeway. I know historically they've been really averse to the idea that they open themselves up to the foreshore and to the city. And the only speculative thought that I have is that the city is anticipating that they can have land release underneath the highways for residential and commercial development and allowing a freer flow into the port, and that summer would be the return for the private sector or an incentive for private sector investment. But you've got the waterfront company there. They've got the two largest real estate developers in the country invest as the owners of the waterfront company. So who knows? I mean, I can't see the city announcing a plan that hasn't been co-produced by these stakeholders and that it has any credibility.
So I think it was still when Patricia de Lille was the mayor of Cape Town that there was this, ask the private sector, what can you do? And there were some proposals about these sort of razor thin, very high buildings in between the two freeways to make use of the land and take the profits from that development to help fund the finishing and so on. So yeah, maybe there is a possibility that we look at this and we go, wow, that's amazing. That's bringing urban design, spatial justice, commuter enhancement, all of those things together in one brilliant design. But look, I mean, Edgar, we know that the long-term solution is better public transport, but that is a very, very long time away. Even when we have better public transport, there's the extra job of persuading people who are hooked on their cars that they should abandon those cars in favor of public transport. And, so what do you do about the choke point? If you spend however many billions of rands and you get 6 months worth of benefit and then people go, oh, it's not such a choke point anymore, let's go there. And then all of a sudden it's a choke point again. And then what do you do? So accelerating public transport is the silver bullet solution.
No, absolutely. But I think, at this point in Cape Town's trajectory, we have to always bring together discussions about how do we transform mobility and integrated public transport system that is indeed world-class, affordable, safe, and that can deal with the systemic question that you're referring to. But that discussion must go in tandem with the affordable housing question that is now also front and center of the city's agenda because of the Constitutional Court ruling recently, and how they are going to respond to that, both the city and the Western Cape government, and what that means for capital investment over the medium to the long term is intimately connected with this question of a viable public transport system. And then thirdly, to change attitudes mean that you need meaningful public conversations. And, and this is about really where the city is going. And I think what we haven't seen to date is an appetite to figure out how do we get to the cultural underpinning of the spatial inequality that the Constitutional Court picked up in its ruling about the Tafelberg site not so long ago. And that really calls for a political context where we can bring together the polar opposites of these debates within civil society and the private sector. And we have a sustained, curated process of engagement and building a civic muscle that we can begin to confront these trade-offs, sequence them in time, and that this is not something that is partisan in political party terms, but it is about really appreciating that some of the questions and answers are not immediately irresolvable, but we need a way of holding that complexity so that we can at least agree on what is the kind of city that we want to become. And then we can adjudicate whether these big investments are indeed in the right direction or not.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Sage words, as always, from Edgar Pieterse, Founding Director of the African Centre for Cities based at the University of Cape Town. WhatsApp says, how is Greenpoint going to handle that rapid influx of traffic? I predict a traffic jam all the way to the N1. And TQ asks, why was the bridge not finished? I thought that was something that everybody was aware of, but maybe there are other people as well. Solly Morris, city engineer, it was his idea to build these freeways to ease traffic in the CBD. Started in 1970 and stopped in 1977 because the city ran out of money. So it was unfinished, not out of design, but out of budgetary constraints. And so now here we are, 77, nearly 50 years later, perhaps going, well, we are going to finish them. And I don't know whether Solly is imploding from wherever Solly is at the moment, or whether who knows what Solly is doing.